So if we imagine someone on a plant-based diet, um, what are some of the common challenges they might face if we think of a rugby player, for example, to make it a little bit easier? They're probably going to want to be quite high muscle mass.
Yeah.
They might have quite. I imagine rugby's quite demanding for energy wise. So what might some of the challenges that they face as a rugby player?
Absolutely, and I think, like you say, a really nice segue into plant-based eating. And for me, plant-based diets get a lot of bad rap. They've had good rap in the past. Don't get me wrong. There was that documentary. I think it was Game Changers on Netflix. We won't delve into that because that could be a second episode. At that time, I was working at a rugby club, and a lot of lads came in. And interesting was like, right, I'm vegan now, and I was like, how so? Oh well, I watched this documentary where they'd hand selected certain athletes that had done well and had actually managed their plant-based diet very well. And these athletes were coming in. I was like, okay, so what have you brought in for your lunch today then? Well, I brought a salad with a couple of pieces of tofu. And then one of the other lads said, oh, I've just got a bag of baby spinach and I'm going to eat that because they're my new crisps now because I'm vegan. I was like, all right, okay. So like they weren't thinking about their fueling. And I think a lot of athletes, when they make that decision, don't take the steps necessary to be prepared for the eventuality that they're going to have to still get the macro and micronutrients in. Protein still exists even for a plant-based athlete, and you can still get it in through foods. Now, thankfully, with the advancements of certain products and brands that have been able to make ranges in supermarkets that are plant-based, it's much more easier than what it used to be. I think I'm going back to like 2018, 19, where maybe it wasn't as big or as well known, and year on year we see more products coming out and more foods and availability of plant-based foods. I think the big one's always protein. So regardless whether you're a runner or you're a rugby player, your protein intake's still going to be important. We know that we need to hit muscle protein synthesis, and there's a threshold to that, but in a fancy way, that's the growth and repair of muscles. And we know that every 2 to 4 hours, we want a hit of protein. Now, depending on what research you look at, a hit of protein currently stands at around 20 to 40 grams, but I'm fully aware that by the time this podcast episode goes out, there's going to be a couple more research papers that kind of maybe debunk that slightly or show that that's maybe not the most optimal. But for now, that's where the research is currently at. So 20 to 40 grams of protein, that's the number we need to aim for effectively. Doing that through a plant-based just requires a bit more thinking and kind of execution, I suppose. Now, through normal meat eaters and standard kind of dietary eating, quite easy to go out. Well, I'm going to have a chicken breast there. I'm going to have a piece of salmon there. I'm going to have a chocolate milkshake here. I'm going to have a high protein, squeezy pouch yogurt there. And that's my protein hit for the day. But when we come to plant-based, we have to start thinking of different foods. Yes, we can eat tofu, but we don't want tofu at every single meal. Or is it tempeh as well? It's like another version of that that's like the fake chicken almost. And the challenge is like, where do I find it from elsewhere? Well, beans contain high amount of proteins. So whether that's a kidney bean, a red bean, whether that's chickpeas, for example, edamame beans, have got loads of different good nutrients in, as well as also having the protein requirements needed. There's a lot of milks as well, so soy milk, etc., that are, or like pea protein milk, that are really good in terms of getting protein intake in. Again, we just have to be smart. There's a lot of soy-based yogurts that we can have as opposed to kind of dairy-based products that will also still help with our calcium uptake, which will help with the strength of our bones. But ultimately, it's just about being smart. I think the first thing we do when an athlete goes vegan is panic that their protein intake is going to drop. Naturally, it will slightly. What we have to do is just find foods that can replace that. The challenge then comes with eating more beans, eating more greens, and the high fibrous nature of that often causes a little bit more gastrointestinal discomfort to begin with, because our bodies aren't used to shoveling so many plants into the body that it becomes unnatural. And actually that much fiber is good for us, but also it is going to cause potentially the requirement to go to the toilet more often. So in and around fixtures and training and matches, we've got to be careful in terms of when we plan our foods so that we don't need to run off and go to the toilet during that time. But protein's quite easy to hit as long as we go down the right routes from there. I think it's sometimes some of the vitamins and minerals that we struggle with more so.
I was smiling because you answered my next question.
Cool.
So with beans and stuff,
Yeah.
like you say, the high fiber, so they can be a challenge around
Yeah.
match day, etc. Something else, maybe nuts and seeds are also considered protein sources for plant-based diets, these can be high in fat.
Absolutely, yeah.
Does this also present challenge around match days, training, long runs, whatever that might be? And how do we overcome them challenges if you want to, hit some protein before you go out for a run or for a match? What sources are we going to look at from a plant-based perspective that are not going to be high in fibre or high in fat and cause that GI distress?
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think fats we tiptoe around in sport quite often because we know they take longer to digest. Yeah, so one of the big challenges is often with fats that they take a lot longer to digest. So as you said about the GI distress or discomfort, is that high fat foods are often like really favoured by the body because they have more calories per gram. So typically speaking, a carb and a protein per gram of carb and protein will be about 4 calories. Whereas with fats, we're looking per gram to have 9 calories. So as a body that's wanting more energy at all times to be able to survive, they're going to sway more towards digesting fats quicker to store them. As a runner that's long distance, that's not a problem because we're probably going to burn through a lot of fats during that run because we know after kind of 60 to 90 minutes, we'll deplete our entire kind of carb or majority of our carb stores or our glycogen stores as they're known in our liver and our muscles, which will ultimately mean that we'll switch over or at least use more fats as an energy substrate to support our performance as a runner in a long distance capacity. Whereas if we look at shorter distance runners or potentially rugby training that might last in nature 60 minutes, we are going to need more carbs to promote better performance. If we load the body with lots of fats, they're going to become pretty useless in that first 60 minutes and might impact our energy or potentially we'll still spend time digesting them. So I think as a plant-based or somebody who's plant-based that's looking to eat them, trying to limit fats 3 hours before training and then obviously have them post-training where possible. A lot of the times I see, athletes forgetting like what fats are almost. So like peanut butter is still a fat. If we're looking at avocado, for example, as a breakfast option, it's still a fat source. Yes, healthy, eggs, still a healthy fat source. But ultimately, we don't want that directly before training. So it's whether we could go, if we're having a slice of toast, for example, and we normally have peanut butter, and whether we go for jam and a sliced banana on top of it, for example, that's going to give us more carbs as opposed to more fats. And I think one of the bigger challenge really for plant-based eating, as we've covered protein, is probably some of the vitamins and minerals that we find a lot of athletes become deficient in really because of, I suppose, the different style of eating that they take.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, click here to get the full episode. And don't forget to subscribe.